So I said in the last lesson we were going to put ActionScript coding to one side and focus instead on drawing tools and Flash animation. So this is an example of a Flash animation that I've set up, and in later lessons I want to show you how to put this together. But I'll cross that one off for the moment, because in today's lesson we're going to be focusing on drawing tools. And I'm not going to be able to have enough time to talk about every aspect of every drawing tool, so you're going to have to, if you want the details, to experiment with these tools yourself. And you can see that as I'm hovering over the tools, a tooltip appears to tell you what it is. Also some properties will appear for you to experiment with. And in addition, if you come across the if you look at the drawing tools with the icon in the bottom right hand corner and you hold your left mouse button down, you'll see additional drawing tools to have a look at. But in this lesson I'm going to be restricted just to talking about creating a trapezium. And creating a trapezium is a good exercise because there isn't a default tool to create a trapezium in Flash. So you have to use one of several methods to create one. And I'm going to be showing you 3 different methods to create a trapezium in this lesson. So I've created a new project, a new ActionScript project called Project 5, and I've just saved that in the usual way. And to start with, I want to show you how to make a trapezium using the pen tool. So the pen tool is already selected there. To make it more accurate, I want to switch on a grid, so I'm going to go into the View menu. I'm going to go down to Grid, and then Show Grid, and then a grid appears. I'm going to make it snap to the grid as well. View, Snapping, Snap to Grid. All that means is that when I click on the stage, it will default to the grid points where they cross. Okay, so it won't go into the spaces between. It will always go to where the grid lines cross, and that means that it's more accurate when you're creating a shape like a trapezium. So it might be nice if I could set up the fill color. At the moment I want a red to a black linear gradient. So it would be nice if I could go into the pen tool fill, but I can't. The reason for that is that I can create an open shape like that one, which you can't apply a fill to. So it just doesn't let you set a fill initially. It will only let you set a fill afterwards if you create a closed shape, which is what I'm going to do now. So I've got the pen tool selected, and I'm just going to click on the stage to create a trapezium. You can do it more accurately than me. I'm just going to show you the general principle of creating a trapezium, and you can see there that there's a little O showing, and that means I'm going to close the shape, which will allow me to fill it. To come out of the pen tool, just click on the selection tool, and then to fill my shape, remember it's a gradient from red to black. So I've got my shape selected, go into the fill, and then go into the bottom left hand corner where there's a linear gradient tool, and then click. I'm also going to remove the outline, the stroke colour, by clicking on the black and then using the white with a red line through it, just to remove that black outline. And to get back to my fill colour, I just have to click on the fill button, and I have options here to change how the fill looks, and I want to change that white colour to a red colour. So I double click on it. Unfortunately my screen isn't large enough to show the colour palette, so I'm just going to press escape and move my colour menu downwards, and then do the same again and click on red. So I've now got a red to a black gradient, and I'm just going to put that colour menu back, and you can see that my trapezium now looks quite similar to the one I created earlier. So I'm now going to show you a different way to create a trapezium. So I'm going to delete that trapezium and remove the grid, view grid, show grid, and the snapping view, snap to grid. And this time I'm going to create a trapezium from a square. And to create a square, I'm going to need to use the rectangle tool, which is that one. And the fill is already set up from a red to a black, so I just need to draw myself a square. And it's quite difficult to draw an accurate square unless you press the shift key at the same time, and then you get a perfect square. So to turn this into a trapezium, I'll just move it into the middle first of all. To turn it into a trapezium, use the sub-selection tool, the white cursor, then click on the edge of the shape, and you'll see little white vertices appearing. And what you need to do is to click on one of these bottom ones, and it will turn into a filled blue vertex. And then you can either click and drag the vertex, but I'm just going to undo that, or you can use your keyboard, your left arrow key, which will make sure it stays in a straight line at the bottom there, which is what we need for our trapezium. So I'm just doing the same thing on the other side with the right arrow key, and I have there now a trapezium created from a square using the sub-selection tool. So that's maybe a bit less accurate than using the grid and the pen tool, so I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to show you now a new and very accurate way to create a trapezium. And to start off with, I'm going to select the rectangle tool again, and I'm going to use a solid colour this time rather than a gradient to start off with. I'll change the fill colour later on. And I need a square. So that's holding the shift key down again to create a perfect square. And the next thing I need to use is the free transform tool. But before I do, I just want to show you what the free transform tool does. So if you're also looking at the transform menu, you'll see these numbers change as I use the free transform tool. So you can see there that has changed from 100%, and that's changed from 100%. So you could either use the free transform tool or the transform menu to achieve the same effects. So the rotate has changed. If I put the rotate back again, I can also skew it if I put my cursor in the right place, and that's changed that. So it's a general deformation tool, and it's quite useful for several things. I'll just show you another form of deformation using the selection tool. Make sure your shape is not selected. Click on the stage, have your selection tool selected, and then put your mouse cursor next to the edge so you can see a curvy line. Then click and drag, and you can create some interesting deformations that way. However, I'm going to delete that because that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is to get my square back, hold shift down again, use my free transform tool, and all I need to do, or all I want to do, is to use the slant function of that free transform tool to create one edge of the trapezium. And to create the other edge of the trapezium, I'm going to copy and paste that first shape, and then flip it horizontally to turn it into a trapezium by putting one shape on top of the other. Now these are two separate shapes, and I want to make a linear gradient fill. So in order to be able to do that, I need to turn it into one merged shape, and I use modify break apart to achieve this. So I'm going to use modify break apart, and then modify break apart again. And because they were both the same colour, and because it was a solid colour, it wouldn't have worked if it was a linear gradient. At that stage, I've now got a merged shape, which I can now apply a linear gradient to. And the same as before, I'm just going to drag that down, change that white to red. So I now have a trapezium made out of two slanted squares, one of which was flipped horizontally. So I'll just remind you of the three methods I used there. First one was the pen tool with the grid showing, view grid, and then view snapping, snap to grid. The second method was using the rectangle tool, and then I used the subselection tool to access the vertices, and then I used the arrow keys to move those around. And then the third method I've just shown you, I used the rectangle tool and then the free transform tool to make it slanty. Then I copied and pasted that slanty square, or rhombus I suppose, and then I used in the transform menu the flip selection horizontally, which created a mirror image of that rhombus, and I put one rhombus over the other rhombus, and I used modify break apart to break both of those shapes into a single merged shape, which I could then apply the linear gradient to. So as I said at the start of the lesson, I can't possibly go through each function of all of these drawing tools. And remember, there's some underneath these menus if you click and hold. I just don't have enough time to do that, so you're going to have to experiment. I suggest you experiment with shapes that are also that have this selected and have this not selected. This merged shape that I've created is very similar to creating a shape with this deselected, and it has slightly different properties to when it is selected, and I'll just show you an example of the type of experiment you can carry out. What is the difference? How is it different? Well, there's one difference straight away. You can't do that with a shape that is an object. So I recommend that you have a look at all these different drawing tools, see how they work, play with their properties, and just generally find out how to make good pictures using Flash. And in the next lesson we'll be looking at stop motion animations.